Good evening, guys, and I hope everybody is having a wonderful weekend. It's Sunday night, and I just wanted to do some more poems recently, and how I was inspired to do them by culture, and elaborate more about how culture can influence someone in the art and the artist to portray something similar from that inspiration, viewing some kind of entertainment, some kind of medium. It could be a picturesque painting on a wall. It could be a news cast in the evening you're watching and you're inspired by a story. So you do poetry or you write a short novel because you can relate to it and you have similar backing in your intelligence level. You have things in common in your everyday life that resonate with the things you perceive in the community. And that's why I say culture in general will influence all artists to do their art. They just don't go to the woods and do poetry or do a novel unless it's usually having something to do with nature and it inspires them and brings out the best in them. What I'm saying is they don't actually live in a vacuum where there's nothing there to stimulate their senses. All our senses are compiled in our brain and our data bank, so to speak, and they come out in different forms when we choose to address the issue in front of us, whether it's entertainment, whether it's a traumatic situation, whether it's family, work, an instance that occurred during our daily lives. And our brains are used to taking in that information and assessing what's good and bad and trying to usually improve our lives. Sometimes dealing with stuff, we will express ourselves better, writing, literary form, speaking, public speaking, if we have a platform to do that at, voicing our opinions in the social media and what have you. And often, because I'm a purveyor of different mediums, like the social networking to promote a book or some poetry I do, or watching good movies and seeing bad movies when I critique them, or listening to good music and turning off bad music on the radio. Perhaps researching old music before I heard once or twice in my life and I liked it. And I wanted to investigate its historical account. So I ingratiated myself with a certain music genre. And that is basically, in a nutshell, what they consider culture. And all culture comes back to the individual and it goes back out to the culture and the community, so to speak, in different ways. Some people don't want to be artists, they want to be left alone, so they will not put that much out in the public sphere. And artists generally are kind of egotistical. I admit I'm somewhat egotistical at times. And they want to impress someone, they want to provide something stimulating to other people that they found enjoyable. It's usually not for bad causes, us artists, us literary majors, us literary artists, us regular campus artists, those who work in computer graphics and make a cartoon, or they help with DJI on a movie. Okay, they have inspiration and they have a script they have to go by. Don't get me wrong, but their art comes out and they do the best they can how they see it based on how they're paid or described how they have to do it while being paid. And so the artist has a lot of eye of the beholder in their mind already, where they're going to give you their best. They're going to give you some kind of idea how they feel and what they see, they hope that you see. And I love poetry now because I'm doing more and more and expounding upon my art, especially in the long game, doing novels, novellas, very short, I want to say short stories. I don't know what you would call them other than novellas, but you can do very short stories, like one page. It's not necessarily prose at that point. It's a little more than prose, but it conveys a meaning, and it's very visual, and it brings a lot of different feelings to the table for the reader to ingratiate themselves with, to basically internalize it and determine if they like it or do they. You know, they can always put something down if they don't like it. They can always put the newspaper down if they don't like it. They can always turn off the TV and their radio if they don't like it. They can always turn off their cellular phones and their computers when they're just fed up with social media and they waste their life on it. You know, we spend a lot of time online seeking instant self gratification, and it's not healthy. It's an addiction. However, when we read something that's really good and it's not using a digital platform per se, it's more healthier because it stimulates our brain to visualize pictures, to visualize scenarios, uh, to visualize interpersonal skills and relationships and how conflict is resolved ultimately. So at the end of the day, there is somewhat satisfaction in our minds about what has occurred. So thinking about the cultural influence on artists, I was watching the series 1883, and I liked the first five or so episodes, and I publicly wrote about it in my critiquing of it. And the last two episodes were horrible. Uh, that series was about a very cute younger woman coming of age, and then they kind of fizzled out with her um, towards the end, and I believe she ended up dying at the end. But I was watching one of the first two episodes, and when there was a battle skirmish with their family going across the prairie with Indians, or I think it was bad guys that had guns and came in and shot up the camp. The one of the mothers, I believe a sister or aunt, her family was killed, her daughter was killed, and her family was wiped out. And she fought a good fight, and she killed a lot of bad guys with the main characters. And then she realized she had nothing left. So she walked by the river and committed suicide. And I was like, wow, that was kind of an iconic and very deep scene for just being, first episode, second episode. Whoever the lady is, I forget right off the hand, great actress, and it was great acting. So I was very enthralled watching 1883. And then it occurred to me that towards the end there, they were running out of money, or their plot line kind of fizzled. And they made a lot of to do about the main female character, settling in another place in Montana or Wyoming, whatever it was. And they just fizzled out. They didn't leave anything to the imagination. They didn't expound upon how they settled where they did when they finally ended up, where the main husband and wife were still alive, I believe, but the daughter was going to, the main character of the whole thing, 1883, was dying because she was injured throughout the travels fighting Indians. But anyways, down at the side of the river and this lady committing suicide, it's understandable and it's very deep, and it's a sad feeling that she had nothing else to live for. And it wasn't iconic, but it was very telling of mindsets back in the day. They're going to sit there and defend their family the best they can. And if they didn't have family when that's their main life, it was very sad. It was very heart wrenching, for lack of a better term. So I sat down that night and I developed Carnal Carnis, and I wrote it over about an hour after seeing that scene. I was so impressed with that scene in general, and it amazed me. That was a good show. And then at the end of the series, I'm not all negative. I love seeing good series. It was supposed to be a prequel to Yellowstone. And it's like, okay, how did it become a prequel at the end? It doesn't show any kind of nexus, any bridging to that of Yellowstone. So it fizzled, and whoever the producers were probably did good, but the financiers by the production company behind them dropped the ball. They really made a mistake with that series, the last 3 or 4 episodes. And I can rewatch the whole thing and spell it out. But I did like the first, I want to say 3 or 4 episodes and 5 episodes. It had deep things that occurred fighting Indians and dying and losing and protecting your family and then dealing with other people in the same bad set of circumstances. In general, it was a cultural influence on me seeing that one first or second episode where that lady, great actress, wow, I was impressed with her. She committed suicide because she had no more family left, and her daughter and her son, I believe it was, were murdered. So I was like, wow, I would love to make that part of me and do my own kind of expose, my own kind of rendition, how I saw that, and the inspiration came from it. And they were flashing back between one of the main characters and his wartime efforts during the Civil War and how bloodied he was when his whole regiment was wiped out. And I thought of that one lone colonel who was the last surviving member of his brigade, and he's injured and he's stumbling off to have some peace. And in the smoke of battle and in all that death, what occurs was he saw beauty. In that field of death and carnage and bloodshed, he saw a carnation. So what I did was I looked up carnation. I looked up its Latin word, uh, origins, and I just read some of the descriptions of a carnation, where it came from. Um, some of its history was kind of irrelevant, but how people find it beautiful because it's a multi-petaled flower when it blooms. And so 1883 and 1 or 2 episodes basically inspired me to write Carnal Carnis. So at this time, I'm going to read this. Carnal Carnis, the flower mightier than my cake sword, to gaze upon deeply and love truly, my visual lord. In the bright of the mists, ample sun drenched, I breathe in your essence steeping, never a thorn or pinched. My Carnis lover, a magenta flesh eye, I fell in love with you, my petal purse, in aroma afloat, Avis edicts divine. Your hypnotized folds where a bouquet explodes, a scent I adore when lovers dote, down by the brook where your love overflows. Stem strong within, time life in the sun, alone but for leaves and proud bosom shaft, we elope in the pasture and soon on the run. Your friends in the grass and smiles in pain, their debutante, jealous of a rainbow mane, known to call for sweet, sweet summer rain. For a stroll past the weeds under a willow tree, held close to my breast, near my heart, in my velvety box laid in part with love and esprit, to envelop you in, to sense you are mine. I hold you so close, my greatest of jewel, will die as I gaze, as our relation unwinds. Your stem is strong and seeks in me your sustenance and root. The breeze flicks your bulb taut and airy, when engaged in a kiss, in our passion repute. How can I love thee, I am soon to pose. Never can I replace such beautiful face with any meek prose or all of my tropes. While seated as one in the cool shale, in the cool shade of ales, a dying slow with all of our ales, when basking in gales and windy travails. Ah, a stab to my heart, but you budding a bloom, my heart aflutter, I rain now a pounce, so I drown two lonely lovers presumed. Ah, goodbye, with love in your eyes, my pink Carnis, as I drift off alone and one of us dies. And use me forever, sinking roots explore deep, eating my own pink flesh the lower you seek. Entrenched is a new life found in your one true love, me. So I really enjoyed writing that, and I loved the earthy and I want to say natural influence I had by reading um, about carnations in particular, because that's what I thought of. That's the first thing that came to mind was a lonely colonel that was injured and he was about to die. And through many war movies, we've probably seen this before. It might be inspired by that somehow in my past. But the lone colonel, seeing the carnage and the smoke, from the gunpowder and the cannon fodder. And then you have, in this battlefield, you have a beautiful flower just sitting there. In the midst of all the chaos and the death, the carnage, the bloodshed again, the red, the broken limbs, the people dying and gagging their last breath. Then you see beauty in nature. You see something that is, heart wrenching and touching to that soul in the midst of all the carnage and the death. In 1883, basically, I want to say they showed an expose of that, and the travelers and the wagoneers going across America at a certain time with the expansionism. And at the same time, the last few episodes were duds. I mean, let's just say, admit it. 1883 was a dud in general, and they killed off Sam Elliott, the other main actor. Showed him at the end, ending his life when he finally got to see the Pacific like his dead wife wanted to at one time. And I forgot how she passed away, but that's why he was kind of mental, especially with post traumatic stress from the Civil War. And he was a tough guy. Great actor in that too. I think most people love Sam Elliott, but then they killed him off at the last episode. But they didn't show much of him getting there once they went to Wyoming. They just showed him at the beach. So there was a lot of gaps. There was a lot of holes in 1883. But the first few episodes, especially with that one lady, I believe she was the aunt of the main mom, and or the main female character. She was the aunt of the main female character, but she was the sister of the main mom. In any event, it was great the first half of that series, and it was horrible the last half. I'll just say that. But that cultural vision of that lady going to the river to reminisce about her family that was just killed, and then killing herself, it was very natural. It was very earthy, showing the river and her committing suicide in a nice dress, that she was wearing before these bad guys attacked their whole community of wagoneers, traveling across the land. They had to set up camps. And so they'd set up camps near watersheds so they can, wash clothes, use the water to drink, basically feed the horses, have dinner at nighttime, bed down, and then move out the next morning. Well, they were close to the water when these people attacked their wagoneers. The wagon train, so to speak. So, anyways, it was very fun, very, very inspirational to write Carnal Carnis and show how nature itself can be very beautiful and show life budding in a bloom. And so, with that cultural influence of 1883, I wanted to pay homage to that in my own way, with the kind of trope, with the kind of scenario of that battle hardened colonel, that battle hardened sergeant. It could be anybody that survived the battle. And, who knows about the end of the war or what happened, but he's injured and he might be dying. And he sees beauty in the in the mix of all that carnage and death, and the fog of war. So thank you guys, and I appreciate it. What cultural influence inspires you to do poetic art? Is it just watching something and something is lurking back there and you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. And I know I have that right here. I feel I had it after watching that scene. And yes, it's a little easier than doing a whole scene with, 100 stagehands and, you know, 20 different actors on a set and having everybody, working together to do one scene at the right time of day, in the right sunlight, reading the right scripts and doing everything in the right order. Of course, that takes a lot of art and a lot of ingenuity to bring together and show um, cinematic portrayal of a battle, for instance. But I just wanted to pay some homage to that one scene where that lady had nothing left and she ended her life. It was still a beautiful scene by the river, um, her alone and her very moribund, her very solemn and very sad. She just lost her whole family. Is there anything else to fight for? You know, middle-aged man and a middle-aged woman might feel that, okay, they can't have children again. They lost everything. So is life worth living anymore? And going across this new country, I think she should have stuck it out and got to Wyoming or California or wherever and lived life the best she could have, and hold her head high, so to speak. But that was my cultural influence. What influences you and inspires you to do poetic art or write a good book from scratch, it being fiction, or writing a novella or doing prose? Is it all nature and the sun and the trees and the animals and beautiful flowers and beautiful, deer running by? Is it, you know, just whatever it is, the desert, the oceans, the streams, the brooks, the tributaries, the lakes, the bays? What is it that inspires you culturally to let it come out of your mind because you're so in tune with that inspiration and you want to be part of it? Ask yourself that question when you do poems and literary art in general. What cultural influence is sparking those memories and those feelings you have for a certain subject? You'll find that when you expound upon it, it's really, really enlightening to how poetic you can be and how intelligent you can be about the world around you. So, anyways, thank you guys, and I hope you have a good weekend and a good week to come. Take care.